An identifier is a token which is used to denote programming entities like variables, class names, object names, function names, and so on. Before we use identifiers, we must keep in mind the rules that are dependent or the rules that are necessary to frame identifiers. So whenever we are creating a variable, we have to keep these rules in mind. Whenever we are instantiating an object, the name of the object denotes an identifier. Again, the rules have to be kept in mind. So whether we are creating a simple program or coming up with an extensive application, identifiers will be used extensively. So in order to use identifiers properly, we must keep the rules in mind. So I've enlisted the rules for you. The first rule is pretty straightforward, where it states that an identifier must start with a letter or an underscore. In fact, please keep in mind that underscore is the only special symbol that is allowed in an identifier. So as you can see in the three examples, we can have a variable name, or we can have any name for that matter, starting with either a letter or starting with an underscore, and we can also have an underscore anywhere in the middle. And also, it's important to keep in mind that identifiers cannot start with a digit. So something like a one variable identifier is not allowed because the identifier is beginning with a digit 1, and that is not allowed. And if you look at the third point, you'll find that it can contain a digit anywhere in the middle or at the end. Although we cannot begin an identifier with a digit, we can have a digit either somewhere in the middle, like we can see here in the first example, var1, var, or we can have it at the end. Only thing that is restricted is you cannot have a digit at the beginning of an identifier. Another point to keep in mind is an identifier cannot be a keyword. If you remember from the previous video on keyword, I had enlisted the list of keywords. So we cannot use any of these keywords to frame an identifier. This is another thing that we need to keep in mind. So something like if, while, these are invalid identifiers. If you look at the second last point, you will find that, like I said while explaining the first point, that an underscore is the only special symbol that is allowed in an identifier. So something like a hash or a dollar in an identifier will not be accepted. And the last point that we need to keep in mind is an identifier cannot contain any intermediate white space. Like you can see here, the variable is my space var. This is not allowed because because an identifier cannot contain a space in between. Having a space in between an identifier is not allowed. So these are the rules that we need to keep in mind if we have to work properly with identifiers. And remember, the identifier is probably the most used token out of the entire list that we had seen earlier, right? These are the tokens. So identifier will be used a lot while writing programs. So please keep these rules in mind. If you found this video useful, do like it and subscribe to our channel. If you have any doubts, please feel free to leave them in the comment section below. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you.